hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestel.
And this is a show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 203, and we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul Bestel, my friend, I call to you from the depth of this snowy void. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, my friend, yes. We're just getting hit by another storm at the minute. Not as bad as the other side of the country. So, yeah, it's all right. We're going through weird storm name phase now. We've got Storm Dara at the minute.
Interesting. Okay.
We had Bert the other week.
They went from Bert to Dara. I
forgot what the C one was. Could have been Claudette for all I know.
Knowing England, it could have been something else entirely.
Cream.
Yes, we'll go with that. We will go with that. How was your trip to York?
It was nice. We survived being swamped on the Sunday. York is usually busy at the best of times. Sunday was the busiest I've ever seen it in my life.
And remind me, what was it that brought you to York?
It was Julie's best friend's 40th birthday.
Right.
So we were there for the Saturday night, and then we thought, well, because I really like York. It's lovely. If you don't mind people just stopping, walking in front of you to point at things, or people just walk into you, or people just shout, or people just randomly taking selfies and blocking the street. If you can deal with that, then it's fine.
Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Saturday night, I went to karaoke. I did not participate in karaoke, but there's a bar here. I usually meet up with some friends for drinks on Friday night. But Friday we went out and my friend got there first. They said, the vibe is bad in there. And there was an Irish band. And when they're in there, it can get just loud and obnoxious. And they're not a bad band, but I love Irish music. And even the last time I was there when they were playing, I remember leaning over to my friend and saying, I think they've been playing the Black Velvet Band for about 6 hours. Like the lyrics are Fields of Athenry, but I'm pretty sure we're still doing The Town I Love So Well. Like this has not changed. So anyway, Saturday night we ended up in there, and that was much more gratifying because you have not lived until you've heard a long married couple just murder their way through Oops, I Did It Again. And other than that, it's as I was saying earlier, it's snowing like a bastard here. I have not gone out today because at this point, digging my car out would just be more trouble than it's worth. So I figure I will wait until it is fully encased in snow, freezes, and then I'll just chisel it out as though it's an Antarctic discovery, a la The Thing.
Well, maybe you might find a flying saucer in the car park.
It's entirely possible. I mean, I could barely get out of there myself the other day. You told me a flying saucer can't get out. I believe you.
Well, the aliens were invading on Tuesday, so they may be there.
Which aliens were these?
I have no idea. This all started last week where all of a sudden I've no idea where it started, but all of a sudden people going, oh yeah, apparently the aliens are invading on the 3rd of December. It's like, what? What do you mean, apparently? What? Who's told you this? Where's this come from?
Odd thing to just throw in as an aside.
I've not seen any sort of government statements or anything. No, just people saying, oh yeah, the aliens are coming on Tuesday. Okay.
The internet is going to internet, I think, is our takeaway from this.
Well, it stopped people drinking unpasteurized milk for a day, I suppose.
Oh, well, good. Thanks, E.T.
That's why his finger glows.
But anyways, we're going to move on because I thought of several jokes, none of which I want to tell on this show.
You do right for once.
Yes. What I will tell on this show are a number of listener stories. Listener stories we are very much looking forward to. We were going to do a Haunting of Houston episode, and we still are. But we're going to be saving that for the first show in January. So if you have any stories from Houston, send them in to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We would love to hear them. We're doing that to celebrate the release of Houston Strange, which is a new podcast by our friend Adam from Weekly Creep. It is a really great ghost show. Adam has put his all into the show. We dropped the first episode on our feed about a week and a half ago. and it was, again, very popular. It's a really, really good show. So if that's your thing, check it out. And then again, send us your Houston stories for our upcoming episode in January. Before we do that, though, we're going to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. While every single person who downloads the Ghost Story Guys helps make us who we are, patrons are the ones who truly allow this show to continue. And so we cannot tell you how much we appreciate what you do for us. And while we'd like to thank all our patrons, we would especially like to thank our latest patrons. Well, I guess technically patron this time. Their name is
Melody.
Melody, thank you very, very much. And if you'd like to support the show, check the link in the show notes or head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys for ad-free early release, bonus shows, and all kinds of other cool stuff.
Cooking tips.
Cooking tips. Yes, there were some cooking tips today. That was very unexpected, but lots of fun.
We're real Renaissance men.
I'm telling you, men for all seasons, except winter. Winter can go fuck itself. Get all of that and more over at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. All right, Paul, my friend, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with the latest batch of listener stories.
Our first stories are from Nazia. When I was a young child, around 6 or 7 years old, I was at my mum's house. She'd gone out for the night and my sister was looking after me. The house was set up in a weird way. The back door was in the kitchen, and right outside the door was my mum's bedroom door. I was sleeping in my mum's room as my sister's baby was sleeping in my room. The kitchen was dark and everyone else was asleep except for me. I started to feel scared. There was a strange energy that was making me feel uncomfortable. I began to hear chairs in the kitchen being pulled along the floor. No one had gotten up, and the house was still pitch black. The sound went on for what seemed like ages. I was so scared, but I couldn't get help, because I'd need to go through the kitchen to get to anyone. At some point, I started hearing sounds coming from the bedroom. The vacuum cleaner that was sitting on the floor at the end of the bed started to move and fell over. I was paralysed with fear at this point, and pretended to be asleep until eventually I did fall asleep. My next experience was an unexplained light. This happened when I was around 11 or 12, and my mum and I were staying at my much older brother's house. We were sharing a mattress on the floor in a spare room. It was dark and we were about to go to sleep when suddenly a super bright light appeared out of nowhere. It's hard to explain, but it seemed very unnatural. It was there for a few seconds, and then it quickly shrunk into a ball and disappeared. I asked my mum if she'd seen it, and she replied she had, telling me not to worry about it and go to sleep. I could tell by her reply that she was trying to make sure I didn't get scared or upset. I remember laying there thinking it felt very alien. A fun fact about me is that I'm terrified of anything related to aliens. Even though I'm 29 now, thinking about this experience still scares the heck out of me. The final experience I want to share regards sleep paralysis. This happened when I was 18 and I was living in a flat with my boyfriend, Austin. One morning, Austin had gone to work early and I'd gone back to sleep for a few hours. I woke up to him coming back into the bedroom. I thought to myself, oh, he's back home. But soon I realised that this wasn't right, as it was still early morning, and on top of that, he was wearing a completely different outfit. At some point, I also realised I couldn't move, no matter how hard I tried. I lay there watching this fake Austin walk in and out of the bedroom. I started to see a black figure out of the corner of my eye standing in the hallway. It started to get closer and closer to the bedroom door. The fake Austin then walked out of the room for the last time and didn't return. The black figure was now in my room, and he was approaching my bed. I started fighting so hard to move and ended up being able to pick up my phone, which is a white iPhone. But as I tried to unlock it, the white part started melting down like paint, and the whole phone turned white. I then lost all control of my body once again and dropped the phone. I then started to hear people talking. I couldn't understand them, but I could definitely hear them. They started laughing really loudly. I knew it definitely wasn't the people in the flat next to me, as I know them, and they never woke up this early, and they've got a very distinctive way of talking. It's hard to explain, but this talking and laughter sounded like it was coming from somewhere else, like a different world or something. I ended up seeing a very bright light coming from the living room, and a sound that reminded me of a train. It got louder, and the light got more blinding until it completely disappeared and the sound was gone. At this point, I'm finally able to move and get up, and I ended up sitting there in shock for a few minutes, not sure what I was meant to do. I decided to run out of my flat and go next door. This also confirmed that they were all still asleep. I told them what had happened, and they all ended up super freaked out. I didn't want to go back to my flat, so I ended up going back to my mum's house. Austin met me there after work, and I tried to convince him that we shouldn't go back to our flat until tomorrow, but I just couldn't get him to agree to it. It didn't matter how much I explained to him that I had a bad feeling that we shouldn't be going there, so that night we went back. My mum had a look around to make me feel better, though it didn't really help. Hours later, Austin ended up drinking with some guys. They left around midnight, and I won't go into details about what happened next, only that it led to Austin being arrested and taken away. I remember sitting there thinking that it was all some kind of warning or something. This experience still makes me feel scared when I think about it. I've had sleep paralysis before, but this was on a completely different level.
So thank you, Nazir. I'm really fascinated by that because, I mean, it sounds like a dream on top of sleep paralysis, which is not really something I'm familiar with. But the fact that it occurred before something so serious, I mean, it does seem like a kind of warning, but a very, I don't want to say obscure one, but a very strange one.
Sometimes you can just tell. I mean, when you've worked in the hospitality industry, there are some days you will be at work and it will seem like a normal day, but things just feel off.
Oh, sure.
And you have to have your wits about you because there will be something occur at some point during the evening that will be a challenge in one way or another. But it's weird. It's happened more than once. It's strange. It's like there's a kind of funk permeating the atmosphere that affects certain people in certain ways. It's a very strange sensation.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, that the other night or last week when my friend walked into that bar and he came out and said, I don't think we should be in there tonight. And when we finally went the next night for the karaoke, we got talking to the waitress who usually, usually waits our table. And she said, boy, last night was not great. And she said, yeah. And there was a number of things that happened that I won't bother getting into, but you're right. You can feel it. So I guess that's a question then. Is this her subconscious trying to alert her, or is this something external trying to get her attention?
I think it could be a bit of both.
Could very well be. Could be an interpretation of external stimulus.
Yeah. And the brain's trying to sort of rationalize and focus on it. And that's why it's got such a strange message, because that's nothing like a standard sleep paralysis experience.
No, I mean, the color running off the iPhone, that very much made me think, okay, so is this a dream? Because that seems very, very dreamlike to me.
Yeah, certainly an altered state of mind.
Yeah. Unless you told me that Tim Cook suddenly wants us to pay extra for the pigment on our phones, which I wouldn't be surprised by. It's just a new iOS update. Yeah, I know, right? It's just a new iOS update. Just shoop, off it comes. You can subscribe to White on your iPhone for $4.99 a month.
We won't share it with Galaxy.
No, you certainly won't. You've got to pay extra for the pigment on your Android phones. It's funny, actually. I've got just briefly, I've got the phone I'm using now is about 4 years old. And I've just realized I just don't need to upgrade. Unless someone hands me a phone, essentially, I cannot think of a compelling reason to upgrade unless this one just dies. I had a phone, I had a brand new Galaxy 24. I think I've told the story before. It fell off the counter. And it had a case on, it had a screen protector. It just fell in such a way that it cracked the screen. Absolutely drove me goddamn crazy. and it would have cost $500 to fix it, which coincidentally is the amount I would have had to pay to TELUS if I didn't return it in pristine condition. So in the end, I'd pay the fuckers $500. And they said, well, do you want to get a new phone? I thought, no, you bastards. I absolutely do not. I've got an old phone. Oh, but the camera, fuck the camera. I don't care anymore. For $500, I'll take pictures with a 4-year-old camera.
It is annoying these days. It's like my phone says, oh, essential updates. And you look at it and it's just crap apps.
Sure.
No, I don't want Temu on my phone, you wankers.
God, would you like to buy a bunch of low-quality shit that chokes out the actual vendors who make things? Temu, we're here for you.
Do you want to buy some of the most distasteful and disturbing items available sale on this planet? Then Temu's the app for you.
Remember, I feel like we just, everything has gone downhill because there was Wish, and Wish was ridiculous, and it was terrible. And now there's Temu. I just shudder to think what the next thing is going to be. I just imagine it's like a hippopotamus vomiting at your doorstep.
It'll be called Baba. And basically, you'll order stuff and it'll just turn up and it'll be a box of dust.
It's just a big box of camel shit. Everything you order is a big box of camel shit. Yeah, there we go. Just a bunch of dead flies. Like that.
You've ordered the bazeem. I can't even talk. The bazeem. I can't even say it anymore. What's his name? Bazeem.
I have no idea. This is delightful, but I don't know who you're referring to.
Why could I not say the word Beelzebub?
Because God has a sense of humor.
I mean, it might do. If anybody shouldn't struggle to say words like that, it's somebody with the middle name Damien.
Which reminds me, and this is again just completely wildly off topic, but there is an episode of Behind the Bastards that was came out recently where they discuss the insane campaign of, I guess we'll call it psychological warfare, that eBay waged against a pair of elderly bloggers who used to write about online commerce. It is insane shit, folks. If you're not listening to Behind the Bastards already, check out that episode at the very least. The guest is Jason Pargin, and it is crazy the lengths to which eBay went. I should say, to which certain people within the eBay organization, eBay claims this was never an officially sanctioned thing, but the degree to which they went after these poor people for doing nothing other than very benign blog posts. And the reason I'm reminded of it is it involves insane shit being shipped in the mail, none of which, shockingly, was from Temu, although Temu may not have existed at the time. Now, if you want to send someone a pig fetus, I'm sure you can just pop that into Temu and you're off.
Better in my day, you just went to the butcher's and asked for some eyeballs and stuff. You know, you didn't need to worry about ordering it in.
Back when the world was a simpler place, a better place.
Halcyon days.
Truly, yep. Nazir, I'm sorry this went the way it did. I guess it's not as bad as some have gone. Although, before we move on, actually, there was something else in one of her stories that I thought was interesting, is the fear of aliens. Because I do that. Yeah, and a friend of mine, I won't say who, but a friend of mine has this issue. Sometimes, disclosure stuff will come up, and she'll send me a message and say, "Hey, is this a thing do you think this is real?" And by and large, I'm like, "Well, no, it's bullshit." Obviously, there, some stuff has been, I think, is legitimate, but it's never the things that, that would make you worry. But just the idea, the presence of aliens, she finds deeply frightening. And I know I myself have, over the years, have had a couple nightmares of alien invasion. And I was kind of curious to know where you fall on this. Is this something that sort of frightens you in any way, or do you just not think about it? I mean, doing what you do, with Mysteries and Monsters, obviously, and reading what you do, you are much more involved with this than I am.
I'm not one of those people who thinks that they are all happy clappy, whatever's going on. And I would suggest that perhaps we should take a step back and look at the big picture rather than mythologizing them and putting our personal interpretations of the way we want the world to be on creatures that have no understanding of us as humans.
No, that makes sense to me. So when you're talking about mythologizing them, are you referring to things like the Space Brothers, this idea that they're all very friendly and that they're all here to sort of to bring us light and love and help raise our vibrations to the 37th dimension or whatever?
Absolutely. Certainly. I think, you see that kind of New Age romanticism attached to it. And it's always been there in ufology from the days of Adamski into the present day, that you will have certain organizations and people who will simply say that they, or who or whatever is going on is purely for the best for us, and they're here to save us and all this. There's no evidence to support any of that. I know Preston Dennett's a big proponent in regards to the friendly alien sort of contact, but I mean, I've spoken to other people that have been taken. There are numerous cases of abductions which sound frankly like the worst thing that you could ever go through. And I'm not really sure going, well, you've just misunderstood it. It's one of those things that, once again, you're taking the experience away from the witness and telling them what they should be like, or that they're not intelligent enough to understand what happened to them, which I don't get. As with anything, you only have to look at this planet. You know, there's lots of people who are quite nice and friendly, and there's lots of people who aren't. There's lots of people who dislike you just on your appearance or your sexual preference. Never mind if you're flying around in a spaceship and you're green, you know, what you've got to factor in, what do they think? Do they just view us as ants in the scheme of things? I mean, this is the other aspect, is the arrogance of humans, that we feel worthy of a visitation, as though anybody out there should come to see us and find out why some people don't want to drink pasteurized milk.
Oh, yeah. Well, can you imagine the hubris of someone saying to themselves, or saying to a being who has figured out how to cross the gulf between the stars, hey, we're super special. Yeah, right. Yeah. We also get really worried about where certain people are going to pee. Zarp. So thank you again, Nazir. Our next set of stories comes from Liam. Liam says, I've waited a while to submit my personal experiences with the paranormal, since I know that you've both been quite busy with the rollout of Fear Daily and the lead up to episode 200. Congrats on both, by the way. Okay, I'll try to be as brief and descriptive as possible. Brennan, you'll be happy to learn that most of these occurred in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where I lived as a child, specifically Eastern PA, Bucks County. When I was very young, 3 or 4, we had a house fire, and while no injuries occurred, we had to move house temporarily. During this time, we moved to Stoddartsville, Pennsylvania, an extremely tiny town that consists of a few houses and a very old inn, the Inn of William Stoddard, established during the late 18th/early 19th century. Now, this is an experience related to me by my mother, who would work there occasionally. There were your standard lights flickering, creaking noises, cold spot type things, which are all easily explained in a continuously used 200-year-old building, except for one particular night when my mother had the wits scared right out of her. I have to explain that my mother was a no-nonsense Irish woman who stood 5 feet tall, weighing in at about 100 pounds, and could stare down the meanest folks you can possibly think of. She was not intimidated easily and brooked no nonsense. She was very active in the labor and civil rights movement and marched for the ERA, which for folks who may not know, that's the Equal Rights Amendment. So not a wilting lily. Also, being Irish, was perfectly aware of the existence of the unseen world. Not anything excessive, just as a matter of fact. So one evening, we as a family, mom, dad, my brother, sister, and my maternal grandfather who was visiting, were having supper at the inn. As my mother recalled the story, she excused herself to use the facilities, which were upstairs. What happened next was what frightened her and caused her to never go up those stairs again. She was standing at the vanity adjusting her hair when all of a sudden she felt as though she were wearing a very long-sleeved, tight-fitting shirtwaist. She distinctly used that term, long out of common usage by the 1970s. A long, heavy skirt, and could smell a very heavy perfume like rosewater, is how she described it. She was looking at herself in the mirror, and she was clearly still wearing her standard mid-1970s clothing. She quickly, immediately, and with great alacrity got the hell out of there. When she got back to the table, she said to my father, "Bob, we're leaving." And we did. I was most upset about not getting dessert. I feel you, Liam. We soon moved to Bucks County, which was still fairly rural back then, and the house we lived in had been built in 1740 or something, and had been burned by the British in the 1770s, rebuilt, and then added to over time. A big 3-story rambler of a house. It had a small graveyard on it, but that's not terribly unusual, especially in more older rural places as this was. Honestly, I never even really remarked on the graveyard. It was just another feature, like, there's a silo, there's a corn crib, there's a graveyard. For my 9th birthday, I was allowed to have a sleepover with some of my friends, and we did the typical 9-year-old stuff. Ate pizza, stayed up and watched TV past 9:30, made Jiffy Pop by ourselves, big deal for a 9-year-old, and played flashlight tag. So, good time all around. My birthday is March 21st, so camping out in the backyard isn't really a great idea, as the temperature could be anywhere from 60 degrees to 20 degrees with 2 feet of snow on the ground. As a result, my parents let us camp out in the attic. The attic was actually a very large, airy, well-lit space, nothing creepy or sinister about it. Looking down from above, the house would be roughly L-shaped, and we were camping in the short part of the L, in our $6 million man sleeping bags, at least mine was, because I was a cool 9-year-old. We fell asleep probably 10:45 or so. At some point later, I woke up, bolt upright, immediately awake, which was unusual for me then as it is now, and I looked down the room to where the stairwell was. I saw a man walking up the stairs. Not looming, not skulking, just a man walking up the stairs. So I saw his head, his shoulders, and so on. You get the picture. Now, I'm not scared. I'm perplexed. It's not my dad. It's not any of my friends' dads, because they weren't there, so I genuinely have no idea who this person was. I wish I could say he was dressed up in Victorian garb or had on chainmail or a cassock, but I don't remember exactly what he was wearing, just that it wasn't remarkable. Except I could see him, clearly. There were no lights on. When he got to the point where his waist was visible, he stopped and looked directly at me. At me. Not in the general direction of the end of the building. He looked into my eyes. He then turned his head, kept coming up the stairs, and proceeded down the long part of the L. I'm proud of 2 things from that night. 1, my bladder discipline, and 2, unshaken faith in the protective power of the blanket, because I did not piss myself and immediately went into the sleeping bag and zipped it all the way up, and somehow got back to sleep. Side note, under normal circumstances, my dog Casey, an enormous Newfoundland, 160 pounds, that is a big dog, would sleep with me or next to me. That dog adored me. However, he would never come up with me to the attic. This was pointed out to me later, and I didn't think about it at the time. Second side note, years later, my family long since moved from that house to another state. It was Thanksgiving dinner, and it was my first Thanksgiving dinner home since I joined the U.S. Marine Corps, so it was kind of a special one. The whole extended family was there. It was after dinner, and we were sitting around telling stories, reminiscing. It was nice. My sister, not normally the most garrulous person, piped up and said, "Hey, does anyone remember Liam's imaginary friend Nathaniel, the Revolutionary War guy?" My mom said, "Oh yeah, he used to go on and on about him, probably because you two wouldn't play with him." My siblings are 4 and 5 years older than me, so yes, they were not going to play with me unless forced. My aunt then joins in and says, "Oh, he was so cute telling us all those stories about Nathaniel. That's probably why he loves history so much. Even then, he couldn't get enough of it." I had no idea what they were talking about. I did not recall having an imaginary friend. And if I did, why would it be a Revolutionary War guy, as my sister put it, named Nathaniel? Why not a space pirate named Zorlax or something? And that's when I started to really think about it, and think about that time in my life. I was a lonely kid and didn't have many friends nearby, or even bike close. Then it clicked. I remembered. I remembered my imaginary friend called Nathaniel, and how he was very real to me, and whenever I wanted him to come back to the house, he would say no. He had to go, but he'd see me again. So, Liam, thank you very, very much. And Paul, I was thinking about this. I wonder if it would be possible to try and track down records of who may have been quartered in a place like that during the Revolutionary War. I understand it's, some time ago now, and not as many records were kept at the time, but you do wonder if maybe if not someone died there, they just lived there. Yeah. But someone named Nathaniel.
Why not? I mean, as someone that had a former soldier go sit on their bed a lot when they were a child, I wouldn't necessarily think it was an imaginary friend.
Well, the other thing that occurred to me is I don't think I know, admittedly, I don't know a lot of kids, but the ones I have heard of, their imaginary friends all have very, very mundane names. And it does make you wonder, You know, I mean, again, like Liam says, why wouldn't you come up with Zorlax or something, like something really cool instead of, you know, I think Nick's friend's kids, their invisible friend was like Yakiko or something, which is unusual for Weston Supermare, but is still a person's name.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, Mr. Skin's the best one.
Of course, yep.
I mean, if you look for them, there are some disturbing ones, aren't there? What was the one that Kev told us about that time? Is that Zizu or something? And then he found that story about another family in another city, and their kid had the same imaginary friend name, and both of them were having negative experiences with them.
Oh, of course. I forgot about that. That would have been was that the Haunted Horse episode?
Might be.
Interesting.
That one seemed to be trying to kill them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bumblebuzz was, I guess, technically an imaginary friend.
No, thank you.
Yeah, hard pass. But yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. I mean, I think it's interesting too that it was in the same place where he literally saw someone walking up the stairs. There really is this element of like fracture to a lot of these stories tonight. You know, like thinking about Nazir's story, where reality just kind of seemed to fracture, where it was not a dream, but it wasn't awake.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with Liam's stories, because with his mom, I mean, her perception was not what she was feeling. And actually, one of our listeners who I had the opportunity to meet last year and then briefly again, or not briefly, I was actually annoyed her and her lovely husband for a long time. Emily, she had a story similar to the mother's where it felt like her perspective, if I remember correctly, because again, it was a year and a half ago. And so Emily, if I'm wrong about this, please tell me. But it's almost like her perspective on who she was or herself fractured, and she could suddenly feel like she was herself, but she could also feel like she was another self who was different. And so it's almost like there's this common unexpected thread so far of just self and point of view splintering.
I think one of the aspects of that as well that interests me is if Nathaniel or whoever it was seen walking up the stairs, is he walking up the stairs from the previous house before it burnt down, or is he walking it from when it was rebuilt? And has the house been remodeled? Because that would be able to date it, because with the greatest of respect, if somebody's died in 1747 and then the house has been burnt down and then the house has been remodeled and the staircase are now in a different part of the house, then that would suggest that whatever that is knows that staircase is there. So it can't be anything from before a certain date.
I'm just imagining Nathaniel standing at the site of the old staircase and being real pissed off. He's just like me when they move around the grocery store. Like, fuck, I hate this. I hate this. I liked it better before.
Because often you would see, I mean, that's obviously what some of the explanations in the old ghost hunting manuals would suggest the reasons why you would see ghosts walking through walls and things.
Right, sure.
Because they were simply following the old floor plan.
Like my friend in Kamloops, who would sometimes sees the man walking across their living room on where the part where the street used to be.
Yeah, there's a I'm trying to think where he was. I once got talking to somebody about a pub, and they were on about their ghost walked through the old front door, which had been bricked up and changed into like a corner seat with a window above it, and that's where people saw something walk in from the street. But the front door had been moved sort of 20 yards further to the front of the building because it was on the corner.
Again, if I was a ghost, I would just walk through whatever door I damn well pleased.
Yeah, rules don't apply to me, pal. I'm in.
What are you going to do? Kill me?
Again. Ooh. See them glasses there?
That's right.
See that bottle on the bar? Wang!
See that giant steaming box of shit outside your house? Okay, that's from Temu. But
yeah, that's not me.
If I would have sent it there. And just lastly, Liam, I just want to say your mom sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And we're actually recording this, coincidentally, we're recording this on the 69th anniversary of the beginning of the Montgomery bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. So that's kind of a cool little coincidence.
Yeah. Never to be forgotten.
Amen to that.
Our next story is from Haley. I live in one of the bigger cities in Oregon, and as a state we have some great haunted history, but not the biggest one. A few years ago, I'd been living with my brother in a newer subdivision. The homes were around 20 years old, so they didn't necessarily seem haunted or scary, for our house had some weird things. I've always been fascinated with ghost stories, but never experienced anything that I could say with confidence was caused by ghosts. To start small, in this house, clocks never worked. Even a brand new clock with a brand new battery would slow down and stop after a few days, no matter which wall it was on. The first distinct odd experience that I had happened early one evening. I was the only one home, and I was standing at the stove watching a pot and stirring it occasionally. There was a plate on the counter that the spoon was resting on, and we had one of those wine glass holders in which the glasses hang upside down mounted on a cabinet nearby. Out of nowhere, I heard a loud crack. I thought that maybe someone had knocked on the door, or maybe my brother had been home all along and had dropped something. In the split second that these thoughts went through my head, I looked down to see that everything in front of me had moved slightly. The pot was now halfway off the burner. A wine glass had come down from the rack. The spoon was off the plate and several inches away. I tried to reason that maybe the glass had fallen and knocked things around, but the items were far enough apart that one could have not caused the other. A few years later, my brother, his then girlfriend, my now husband and I were hanging out in the kitchen. Suddenly, a ukulele that we had hanging on a nearby wall flew off and landed on the floor. We thought that the cord had been looped and knotted around the neck of the instrument had simply come untied, but when we went to pick it up, the cord was still firmly knotted and attached. The real kicker was that it had not just been hanging on a loose nail or something which it could have easily slipped off. It was on one of those hooks that curves into the wall and anchors itself. The hook was still firmly in place and angled in such a way that the only way for the ukulele to be removed would be by lifting it up and off the hook. My husband immediately began researching to see if there had been any seismic activity in the area or any large planes flying overhead. Nothing. We all saw the ukulele come off the wall, and none of us could explain how it happened. I moved out shortly after for unrelated reasons, and my brother hasn't reported anything else unusual, but he still gets nervous and refuses to acknowledge the strange happenings when I bring them up. Although I'm sure whatever caused it was attached to the house, I still get a little nervous when I come across that ukulele in my closet. Other weird tidbits. When we were young, our family lived in a different house in the area, and one morning I swear I saw a disjointed shadow pass by the other side of the shower curtain. A friend who grew up in that neighbourhood talked about feeling odd in her house and seeing her sister walk out of the same room twice. My theory is that based on the geography of the area, maybe the subdivision was built over an old burial ground. And I just want to say right now, this is one of those things that fascinates me when objects inexplicably wang themselves off walls, is that people will go, oh, well, it must be seismic activity that's caused it. The wonderful parapsychologist Tony Cornell in 1980 demonstrated on an abandoned house that vibrations caused by seismic activity could not force objects to leap, only fall.
Oh, interesting.
And that was recorded 42 years ago. It is a matter of fact. Things will shake, shudder, and they will fall off. They will not, because at the end of the day, that's kinetic energy. If something's moving forwards or leaping, it has been thrown for some reason, or it has been there has been some kind of energy that has caused that to move in an upward trajectory, especially if it's on a hook.
Yeah, oh yeah, the hook is what really got me.
There is nothing seismic or vibration-wise that could cause such an isolated incident to occur without every other item in that house flying about. It's scientifically impossible.
Which, when combined with everything else, I think just makes it you're having to reach very, very far. I think at that point I don't want this to be the thing that it clearly is. So we're going to come up with something else.
Well, exactly. But this is the thing. You can't disprove something by saying it must be this when the science proves that it cannot be there. You know? You can't put that forward. It can't happen. It doesn't happen. That's not what happens. Even when you see an earthquake, like massive earthquakes, things don't go flying off the wall across the other side of the room, everything goes. You know, it's not just one thing. It'd be like a picture flying across. Well,
The earthquake's
why
just
is
like,
that one
fuck
gone?
this picture in particular.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it might be somebody who doesn't like the ukulele.
This tiny Tim-ass bullshit. Get out of here.
I mean, there's plenty of hipsters here that play them.
Really? The underground ukulele community of Sheffield.
It's had a real resurgence the last 10 years in this country, ukuleles.
How strange.
Mm.
I just assume everyone's living in smaller apartments, so they need smaller instruments. You know, it's hard to have an upright bass in a 300 square foot walk up.
No, there's loads of people. I'm not saying there's loads of, you know, they're not using them as like some kind of version of the mafia walking around with their violin cases. You know, everybody's got a ukulele case, but there's enough of them to make you realise that it's not a passing fad.
Interesting. A lot of children of Tiny Tim and Israel Kamakawole. Speaking of ukuleles, I found a story of someone else who had a haunted ukulele, which I thought I would share briefly here. My mom had a best friend / roommate who died from cancer when he was staying with us. His brother gave him a red ukulele with inspirational quotes written on it. And there was another blue ukulele that belonged to my younger brother. We only played the blue one and never played the red one. My mom and my younger brother moved away, so we were going to ship my brother's belongings through the mail. Someone mislabeled the boxes and we never got around to shipping them. I took my brother's room and was clearing away the boxes when I remembered the ukuleles. I took both of them out and put them on the shelf. A few nights later, I was woken up by the red one strumming itself. It was one singular hum, and it was still relatively in tune, unlike the blue one, which was completely out of tune. So I ignored it and went back to sleep. It did this a few more times. I was learning how to play on the blue one, so I just left it next to me on the couch usually. One day when my sister and my dad were at work, it was next to me as usual. A singular strum came from the ukulele. I was completely alone, and I looked around expecting to see a bug or something that bumped the ukulele, but there was nothing. It kept doing this. I was pretty spooked. We have many instruments in the house, and these ukuleles are the only ones that do it. I decided to stare at it, and it kept silent. I leave the room, and what do I hear? One singular strum. They only started doing this when my brother left, and they're sentimental, so I can't get rid of them. I've used other ukuleles, and they don't do this. The red one tunes itself when it strums. I have the other one tuned for left-hand playing, but it keeps on switching, and nobody else plays it. And yes, I do have working carbon monoxide detectors. It might just be stress making me imagine it, but why just ukuleles? And I don't think there's any more sentence that points to what it's like to talk about this stuff on an open forum than having to throw in, yes, I've checked my carbon monoxide detectors. Just on the off chance that one of the effects it has is making you hear phantom ukuleles.
Well, it's clearly the ghost of George Harrison.
There we go. Well, that's fine.
All the Beatles, apart from Ringo Starr, were fans and played the ukulele.
No kidding.
Harrison loved the instrument because he was obsessed with George Formby, a British megastar of the sort of vaudeville era, so 1920s, 1930s. And he used to sing, I'm leaning on a lamppost on the corner of the street until a lovely lady walks by. And he'd do all these really crap films where he'd be, oh, George has gone into scrapes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, blimey. Oh, I'll sing a song. Oh, like that. And he played a sort of special ukulele which had an extended neck and used the back of a band. He had a special one, but he was primarily the biggest person to sort of promote the ukulele in Britain, to the fact that there is a George Formby ukulele orchestra that tour the world to this day. And so it's strange because it's a fairly modern instrument as well. It was only invented at the latter end of the 19th century. It's a Portuguese instrument.
Oh, fascinating.
Which oddly became popular in Hawaii, which then spread around the world because the king of Hawaii loved them. I think you should look into the history of the ukulele in Canada, Brendan. I think you'd be very surprised.
Okay, well, you can't leave me hanging like that. Tell me more.
The Canadian education system was changed in the 1960s, and over 50,000 children were trained to play the ukulele through the school's music program.
When you say it like that, it sounds like we were going to send them overseas to win some kind of musical war.
It was known as the Dawn program.
The Dawn program?
Dawn, D-O-A-N-E. The gentleman who introduced it was called Doan.
Interesting. I assume he had stock in a company that makes ukuleles.
Apparently they were cheap.
Oh, okay.
And he wanted kids to play instruments, and it was the easiest way to get them in that didn't sound like a fucking recorder.
That's fair, yeah. I mean, or a set of drums or something equally diabolical.
Yeah, because once you've heard Frere Jacques played badly on a recorder, you never want to hear that instrument again.
I don't know that I've ever heard anything played well on a recorder. I think that's the purpose of a recorder, is to play things badly so that you can then play it well on something else.
I had a green one at junior school.
And many a Frere Jacques was played that day. I mean, I think it's good that I actually think it's good to give kids musical instruments. You know, if you don't have an aptitude 100%. For it, that's fine. But I think it's a valuable thing to have. And I mean, I played trombone for a year because we had to pick something, and I had no idea what to pick. Because I just didn't know anything about music. So I think trombone was left. It was trombone and flute, and I didn't have any interest in flute. So I got the trombone. And I think I would rather have had the experience of learning to play it than not. You know, I think it was just the way it worked is it was like 1 year you had to do it. And then after that, the school just didn't give a shit. And so we stopped paying the rental on it. But I think, you know, if you actually have like consistent instruction in how to read music, I think it really kind of helps your mind absorb other kinds of information. I mean, in fairness, even though I can't read music anymore, I actually have a pretty good aptitude for languages. And I think, honestly, if you had to ask me, I think that comes from having to learn music.
All children should have access to the art.
100%. Yes. Yeah, they should absolutely not be just something for the wealthy.
Not everybody wants to play sport, and not everybody's academically minded. Some people are artistically prescribed from birth. I think it's a natural talent sometimes. And I think the arts always get short shrift in the educational system, despite the fact that I think, as you refer to there, I think the mental health benefits outweigh anything else that kids get an experience of in school.
Oh, yeah. Well, honestly, I think and this is a larger point maybe for another time, but I think we undersell the importance of beauty just in the world. I think there's this weird thing that anything other than grinding monotony is like frivolous and unnecessary, but there has never been a single successful society where everything is concrete and miserable. That it can't last. People need beauty. They need, even if you're not good at something, you know, if you're bad at music, if you like doing it, fuck it, do it. If you're a bad singer, like I'm not very good at singing, but I do it when I'm by myself because it feels nice to do it. And it's so weird that we've turned these into weird specialties, things that you should only do if you're really good at it or some shit. That's nonsense. That's bullshit. And when it comes down to everything, when everything else stops, what do you have left? Not commerce. You have fucking art. When the pandemic locked everything down, what do people do? They watched shit on Netflix. They watched movies. They listened to music. They read books. That shit comes from the arts. It's a very valid thing. And it really burns my ass when this is and I used to hear this from my grandfather, as much as I loved him. He used to say this, you know, you can't make money in the arts. Yes, you fucking can. It's not easy, of course, but you absolutely can. And this notion that there's no money in art, okay, well, what do you watch at the end of the day? Do you just stare at a wall and just, reenact Plato's cave in your fucking head? No, you don't. You read, you watch, you listen, you consume art. That is a valuable thing to you.
Well, that's because the word art has been sort of dumbed down in the world that just wants everybody to be an automaton that just wanders around doing menial, unfulfilling jobs to make corporate monsters even richer than they already are, rather than intrinsically value something that has been an integral part of human evolution since the dawn of civilization. All cultures in the past, from the Aztecs to the Egyptians to the Mesopotamians to Neanderthals wandering around plains across the world, all of them used music and art to communicate, cohabit, and evolve. And to remove that from the modern humanity is the stupidest thing that only somebody who sees value only in money could think of.
Exactly. Speaking of money, we got to get some of that so we can keep making art. So we're going to take an ad break and we'll be right back.
Our next story is from Teresa. Hi guys, thank you for all the great work you do. I've officially caught up on all your episodes. I know black-eyed kids' children are not a popular topic, but I have a story. In August 2021, I was relaxing on a weekend and things were quiet, and then all of a sudden someone was banging on my door. Hard. I reluctantly went to check, and as soon as I stood up I got goosebumps up and down my body. Something did not feel right. When I looked through the peephole, I saw two kids. A boy about 11 and a girl of about 16. They did not look right, and I could not say why exactly. I could see them taking turns banging on my door and the doors of my neighbours. They looked serious, almost mean. I thought maybe there was an emergency, but they didn't say or yell anything, nor did they ask for help. And then I caught the eye of the boy looking into my peephole. Creepy. They were dark, not black, but definitely not right. I'm very aware of and have seen way too many paranormal things to be opening my door, so I waited. After 3 more rounds of banging on the doors, they moved down the hall. I live in an apartment complex and the buildings are set up hotel style, with the front doors on the inside of the building, and you need a key to get in. I work from home, so I can recognise my neighbours fairly easily. But I've never seen these kids before, and I'd not seen them again until August 2022. The exact same thing happened again with those exact 2 same kids. This was not something easily forgotten. Originally I thought I was mistaken, and then the August of last year confirmed my suspicions when it happened all over again. Same kids, same exact events. Nothing has ever come from this, and I never opened the door to find out what was going on. Thankfully, this August has passed and they've yet to return. Originally I thought I was mistaken, then August of last year confirmed my suspicions when it happened all over again. Same kids, same exact events. Nothing ever came from this, and I never opened my door to find out what was going on. Thankfully, this August has passed and they've yet to return. I'm convinced these were the black-eyed children people talk about, and pray they don't come back. Thank you for reading my story. Please keep up the positivity, and know that listening to you two laughing brightens my day. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa. And I really thought this was interesting, Paul. I hadn't heard black-eyed kids in a little bit. So I did a quick look, and I mean, I guess I should ask you first. Have you heard many stories of the black-eyed kids recently?
It depends how much credit you give to certain researchers.
I see.
Because some people constantly go on about them, but I don't think people take those people particularly seriously these days due to other aspects of their research, shall we say?
Of course. I actually was at his website earlier, and I'm like, this is all lies. I was looking just for like little bits.
Every time I see a new post, I'm like, oh, what's he made up today?
Yeah, exactly. Got to keep those clicks coming.
So I think they're one of those things. I think if you look for them, as in the reports, you'll find them. But I think the general paranormal community either kind of has dismissed it all as being nonsense and exaggeration, or because they can't comprehend what's going on, they just don't bother looking into them anymore.
Yeah, I do feel like it's one of those phenomenon that so many people, it became such a, I don't want, it wasn't a meme, it's kind of pre-meme, but just such a well-known thing that people were writing like fan fiction. You know, it just, people were inventing accounts. It just be kind of like a Slender Man thing, you know, it sort of broke containment and kind of became almost like a creepypasta unto itself.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I found an article on Atlas Obscura, which is weirdly brand new. It came out on the 24th of October, less than a month after Teresa sent this into us. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of it here. It says, author Jason Offutt, who teaches journalism at Northwest Missouri State University, has been researching black-eyed children for more than 10 years. He has interviewed people around the world who claim they've encountered the children. Their eyes are like a rat's eyes, just black, Offutt says of the figure's most notable feature. There's no pupil, there's no white, there's no iris. It's just totally black. In the stories, the children usually appear to be school-aged, anything from a kindergartner to a high schooler, and wearing outdated clothing. In one account, the children wore new clothing with the logo of a sports team that had folded 10 years earlier. The children are described as speaking in a monotone voice more mature than expected for their age. They often repeat the same phrase, and they are insistent on being let inside, whether it's into someone's house or car. The children plead at first, asking to make a phone call, use a bathroom, or catch a ride, but eventually become more aggressive, says Bridget Burke, an adjunct professor of religion at Montclair State University who has written about the urban legend. A key element of the encounters, one that echoes older tales of devils and vampires, is that the children must be invited in to have any power over an individual. If denied, they eventually disappear or wander off, but not before terrifying their would-be victims. And I also found Jason's post on Twitter where he talked about this. And I thought it was interesting that Red Pill Junkie, who folks, I'm sure you guys know, he's well known in the sort of the Fortean community. And he replied, talk about a blast from the past. When was the last time reported someone a BEK encounter? And then Offit replied, it's been a while. But I, as we can see here from your story, Teresa, I don't think it has been a while. I just wonder if, as you say, the paranormal community itself, I wonder if it reached such a point of saturation, they stopped listening or they stopped looking, or if it became so familiar that people stopped reporting it.
I think you see this a lot, that less ethical people in the paranormal will jump on any bandwagon that comes along.
Not ethical people in the paranormal, Paul? Say it ain't so.
I'm afraid to bust that bubble, mate. I'm sorry to do this to you, especially so close to Christmas. And I'm sorry. And so, it's like, how many haunted dolls are there now?
Oh, Christ, I know.
Dybbuk boxes, spirit radios. We've got this woman over here who's marrying ghosts left, right, and center. I mean, the delusion there is it's just ridiculous. It's the most laughably stupid crap. And it's always published in the press, and you're like, what's going on here? They're not laughing with you, they're laughing at you. But, it's that old adage, there's no such thing as bad publicity, I suppose, for these people's egos. I mean, you look at Dogman reports.
Yeah.
And the idiots over here are talking about Bigfoot. And, there's a guy who runs around in Birmingham who just makes up the most ludicrous crap and publishes books about it, and it's laughably bad. And you can tell that he's just pulling stories out of his arse. There's no foundation to most of the stuff he publishes. And the way he deals with criticism, you can quite clearly see he wants to be famous. He just doesn't give a shit.
Out of curiosity, do you get a lot of sort of less than credible people trying to get on your show?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, eh?
Yep.
Without obviously naming them, can you give an example of someone who was clearly a grifter who tried to get on?
I've had a couple of well-known conspiracy theorists try to appear.
Oh, okay.
One who's currently trying to count the costs of lying about the Manchester Arena attack. I'll say that much.
Oh my God.
An odious man he's always been. Crappy Bigfoot researchers always message me. I get a lot of messages from psychics.
Really?
Which is quite odd, because surely they should understand, they should be able to tell that I'm never going to reply to that email. I'm just going to delete it. Because
being told
whilst
fuck
I'm not
off.
I will always endeavour to investigate anybody that drops me a line. I mean, sometimes people drop me a line and I'm like, bloody hell, like when Pat Spain did. I was like a little kid when I got an email from him. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe he wanted to, firstly, that he listened to the show, and secondly, he wanted to be on it. And sometimes you get that. That's one of the great things when somebody like that drops you a message, or you speak to somebody and they tell you they listen to the show and you're like, wow, that just blows my mind sometimes. And so I'm very fortunate. I've had sort of, when I first started, the first 2 or 3 years, I was getting sent a lot of people from sort of Fortean booking agents from the States, and most of it's shit. We died in past lives, and then we got married to other people and divorced them, and then we met each other, and therefore we've married each other because we've got back to what we were before we died, before we were reincarnated. You're like, no, no. I mean, there's only one psychic that regularly comes on my show, which is a guy called John Russell, because I really like John. He's a really nice bloke, and he's full of interesting stories, and he's got a lot of great stories about ghosts. He doesn't try and tell us about this, that, and the other. He's more in tune with the paranormal than actually sort of trying to find missing people or stolen children or some of the, the whole world of psychics is littered with some of the most audacious chances that you could ever wish to meet. And in another world, they'd just be fraudsters.
Sure.
They'd all be doing check fraud or insurance fraud, but instead they've decided to use their powers of shitness to pretend to be a psychic.
Yeah. That is the only people we get trying to appear on our show are bullshit psychics. Those are the only people I get. Well,
clearly they're not good then, are they?
Yeah, no, that's exactly. Well, they're not. What I love is they say, do you have guests on your show? Because if so, motherfucker, just listen a little bit. You don't have to listen to a whole show. I get you sending out a lot of emails, but that's alienating, man. If you just straight up like, I don't listen to your shit, but I want to be on it. Don't tell me that. Like, lie to me a little bit. It's all you get, just a little bit. I'm not a hard sell, but you got to lie at least a little.
I remember once speaking to a well-known conspiracy theorist that I'd agreed to do an interview for in regards to a favour for getting somebody else who I really wanted on. It was like, buy one, get something really shit free. Like Temu, really. And this was during the pandemic, and he'd been online saying it was all a conspiracy, it wasn't real, none of it was real, it was all blah, blah, blah. And he's all into ancient aliens and all that bullshit. And it was it was like listening to a drunk man that you'd found in a park who'd lived on cheap cider for 10 years, just talking bollocks at you because he wants you to give him 50 pence for a cup of tea or something. Or he says a cup of tea, but he's going to put it towards another bottle of shit cider. Yeah. And then after about half an hour, he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I've got to go. I'm having some furniture delivered." And I've never been more relieved in my life. Because I was literally at that point where I was hovering over the connection and I was going to just
my internet cut out.
I'm just going to cut you off, mate, and say, pretend my internet's dropped, and then we'll not be able to rearrange it. Because it was just like 40 minutes of bullshit. And I've never been so pleased to hear somebody say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I've got to go." It's like, thank fuck for that. Oh, man.
I do love that on an email in which she thanks us for our positivity. We've just spent half an hour just shitting on half the community from a great height.
I don't care. There's a lot of the community needs shitting on from a great height because it's shitty.
No, I agree. Not you, Teresa, though. We appreciate your email very, very much.
Yes, and keep it up, because obviously, did they eventually come back? Because obviously that email was sent before the end of August. So did they return?
No, it was sent at the end of September.
Oh, that is disappointing. But that's intriguing to me on two things. Firstly, I've never heard of a repeating annual event of that nature, ever. I might be wrong, but I've never come across that kind of thing. And how are they getting in if it's a locked community? Is it one of those where sometimes you'll live in these kind of things and you'll see somebody, you're not quite sure, is it number 16's grandkids? Are they coming to see the granddad? Oh, well, I'll let them in. Is it one of them? But for it to happen like 3 years in a row and the same kind of thing going on. And did anybody else see them, Teresa? Did anybody else say, "Have you seen those weird kids?" So please do some investigating.
Yeah, we would love to know if you come up with anything.
Yes. Does anybody still listening?
I hope so, because we got some ads for them.
Get down.
Our final story of the night is from Rachel. Rachel says, "Hi, Brennan and Paul. I'm a huge fan of the podcast, and since I started listening about 18 months ago, I've also picked up Mysteries and Monsters and now Fear Daily. You guys keep pumping out the hits. I really appreciate your focus on mental health, and listening to your various podcasts has gotten me through a pretty rough 2024. I'm writing to you to share some of the unexplained occurrences I had when I lived in my first apartment, after moving out of home when I was 17 in the early 2000s. At the time, I rented a 3-bedroom apartment with 2 friends who had moved with me from the tiny little Australian country town we grew up in to Melbourne to go to university. The apartment was formerly a 2-story house built in the 1930s in an older suburb, a 10-minute tram ride outside of Melbourne City that had since been converted into 2 apartments, one upstairs, one downstairs. We lived in the upstairs apartment. The 3-bedroom apartment was huge. I mean, 3 university students shouldn't be able to afford this huge. We got a ridiculously good deal on rent. Aha! It's always the tell. The previous tenants had broken their 12-month lease 8 months early, and the rental agent desperately needed tenants to move in ASAP to cover the rent. The apartment itself was completely bizarre in design. What had once been a relatively large second floor of a home had been haphazardly turned into a self-contained 3-bedroom apartment. It had definitely been given the landlord special, and it felt like nothing fitted quite right. The kitchen and bathroom were oddly placed as architectural afterthoughts, which, to be fair, they were, and cupboards and wardrobes randomly dotted the hallway that ran the entire length of the apartment. All the floors, including the bedroom, were tiled. I never felt comfortable there, and my mother blamed this on what she described as the bad feng shui of the crammed floor plan. Side note, my mother knows nothing about feng shui, so I'm not sure where she pulled this pearl of wisdom from. Here are just some of our experiences. Occasionally, when we were in the shower or getting ready to shower, the bathroom would get an overwhelming scent of male cologne. Like, so thick you could almost taste it. Think middle school boys' locker room full of Axe body spray thick, except a little more Drakkar Noir / Brute Retro. The scent would be cloying and barely tolerable, but would then dissipate completely in seconds. It only ever happened when myself and my female flatmates were showering, never to our male friends, partners, brothers, etc. when they stayed over. And it only ever occurred after we had taken our clothes off. It felt very intimidating and lecherous, and thinking of it almost 20 years later, it still makes my skin crawl. Another experience occurred when me and my flatmate Kate were in the kitchen cooking late one night, while our third flatmate Maria had gone to bed early as she was unwell. Her bedroom was at the end of the hallway, and the only way to get in or out was to pass by the kitchen door. The hallway was a dead end with just her room at the end. Being unattended teenagers living on our own, we were cooking away in the kitchen and being absolutely too noisy for the time of night when we saw someone walk by the kitchen door from Maria's room down the hallway. Without words, we both instantly looked at each other with that "shit, we're making too much noise" face, and sheepishly said, "Sorry, Maria, we'll keep it down." Only for Maria to emerge from her bedroom, bleary-eyed, asking why we had said her name. She had been in bed the whole time and had definitely not just walked past the kitchen. It was only then that Kate and I realized that we hadn't actually seen Maria walk past the kitchen door. We just noticed someone walk past the kitchen door in our periphery and had assumed it was Maria. Cue 3 terrified teenage girls assuming there's a burglar in the house, clearing the place room by room, armed with an IKEA kitchen knife and a cricket bat. No one was there. The apartment was still locked from the inside, and we never worked out what had occurred. That night, we all slept together in the only bedroom that had a lock on the door. On another occasion, I was walking home from the nearby tram stop after uni had knocked off for the day, when I looked up our driveway and saw that the living room and kitchen lights in the apartment were on. It was early evening in the winter, so the yellow light coming from inside was very obvious in the dark, and I could clearly see our illuminated bookshelf complete with empty liquor bottles, a staple of university sharehouse decor. While I was looking up at the windows, the living room curtains were drawn closed by whichever of the girls were home. Assuming I would be greeted on arrival by Kate or Maria, I went up the stairs and let myself in, only to find the apartment in complete darkness and silence. The kitchen and living room lights were off, and there was no response when I called out to whoever I figured was already home. I freaked out and thought maybe someone had broken in, someone who would have to be still inside given that I had a view of the entrance the entire time. So I ran to my downstairs neighbor's apartment and he came over and we went in together. There was no one inside and no sign of anyone having been in there. He checked under every bed and in every closet. He even checked the manhole cover in the laundry in case someone had entered and exited that way. But it was painted over solid and had decades of dust built up. He kindly stayed with me until my housemates came home. I was so shaken by that particular experience that I spent the next week staying at my parents' house in my little country hometown, and even considered quitting university altogether and moving home. This next experience is the strangest to me because, on some level, the idea of ghosts and hauntings makes sense, but this was a ghost or memory or replay of a living person. Like many share houses, the roster of residents changed over the years, and this particular event occurred after Kate had moved out, and my older brother Tom had taken over her lease and was living with me. I was laying in my room in the middle of the day, watching League of Gentlemen DVDs with my then boyfriend, when we heard my brother come home. We heard his keys in the door, the front door swing open, and relatch closed. We heard his distinctive footsteps leading up the hallway into his bedroom, and the sound of his gym bag being dumped on the floor. These were not the sounds of someone coming in. They were distinctively the sounds of Tom coming in. The familiar pattern of sounds I was used to hearing every afternoon, day after day. We both yelled in unison, without mentioning anything to each other, "Hey, Tom!" Getting no response, we got up to hassle him for ignoring us and just generally have a chat, only to find his room empty. The front door still locked, no gym bag on the bedroom floor, and no one in the house. My brother came home, for real this time, about 40 minutes later. My boyfriend, who claimed not to believe in anything supernatural at all, insisted it must have just been reverberated sound from the downstairs apartment that we had both just misheard or misinterpreted. But he never stayed overnight in my apartment again in the following 12 months before we separated. I've saved the oddest experience for last. What stands out about this particular weirdness is that every single person who spent the night in our apartment experienced it without fail, including my mother and father, as well as my very non-believing best friend. Every night, late at night after everyone was in bed, we would hear the sounds of our dining room table's chairs being dragged along the tiles in the dining room, as though they were being pulled out and pushed back in over and over again, with varying speeds and intensity. Like the experience with Tom coming home, but not coming home, these were distinctly familiar sounds of these particular chairs being pulled out. The exact same sound we would hear throughout the day when we got up or sat down at the table. This would happen on and off for sometimes up to 2 hours at a time. Nobody was ever able to witness it happening, including many sting operations me and our friends set up. And the chairs were always tucked back in exactly where they should be in the morning, with no sign of movement or disturbance. We even went so far as to draw around the feet of the chairs and chalk marker on several occasions to be sure. But we still found the chairs safely inside their undisturbed chalk circles in the morning. But everyone heard it nightly like clockwork. Friends would stay over just to hear the famous chairs. I used to tell myself it was just echoed noise from the people in the downstairs apartment, but the sounds continued nightly over the 3-month period that the downstairs apartment was unoccupied. It always unsettled me, but I learned to ignore it and would go to sleep listening to my iPod with my headphones in. I never felt comfortable living in that apartment, and I would stay at my boyfriend's place on nights that I would have otherwise been there alone. On the few nights that I had no choice than to spend the night in the apartment alone, I would leave every light in the house on, and I would literally barricade myself into my room for the night, pushing my dresser up against the door and not leave until sunlight. We had a number of other unexplained experiences while living there, but this email is already looking like War and Peace, so I'll stop here. After 7 years of living there, I moved out in 2012. I've since found out, by coincidence, that a lady I currently work with lived in the same building, but in the downstairs apartment, in the 1990s, when she was a uni student, and she and I spent a quiet night shift comparing creepy tales, as she'd had a lot of weird shit happen too. When she told me that they had called whatever entity was in their apartment Peeping Tom, because they would sense his presence whenever they were getting changed or showering by the sudden, overwhelming scent of cheap cologne, I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. Anyway, that's it for me, so I hope you enjoyed my tales of Antipodean sharehouse terror. Thanks again for the amazing podcasts, and if you ever find yourself down under, I'll take you out for a drink at one of Melbourne's many haunted bars. Thanks for reading, Rachel. Rachel, thank you. That was incredible, and good God, I'm glad you do not live there anymore. What a horror show.
Sounds great.
Of course, Paul Bestel's Wild Ride.
Good that, isn't it? Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah. I love that they tried, like they did the scientific thing. They drew the chalk circles.
Yeah.
And they still heard it, which is just kind of mind-bending.
They're the kind of sound, though, like Rachel says, these are the kinds of sounds that you know what they are.
Sure.
Everybody knows the sound of a chair being pushed on the floor and that scraping noise it makes, or squeaky noise, depending if it's like a lino or a tiled floor or something. You know. But I have to chuckle with the bit with the guy coming back and the boyfriend saying, "Oh, you must have misheard it," and then he didn't stay over again.
Yeah, it was swamp gas, but I gotta go. That's the I have a girlfriend, she lives in Canada, you don't know her, of paranormal explanations.
The scent thing is quite distinctive as well, because obviously over here, Axe is called Lynx.
Oh, okay. Of course, right.
And it is potent.
Yeah.
It is overpowering. It's one of those things that is remarkable. They make the worst television adverts in the world as well. They
do they?
Look like they've been made by somebody who's 17 who's just discovered LSD. Because they're nonsensical, bad, and with really crap CGI in it. They look cheap, which is ironic because it smells cheap.
It's brand consistency.
Well, yes, it is. I always find it quite ironic because they always push themselves as being like sex appeal links. So it was always like sexy scents for young men. And this kind of, if you look at some of their early adverts, it's very misogynistic.
I'm sure.
But ironically, they're owned by the same company that make Dove, which likes to promote itself as the most right-on women's body products in the world. And that always makes me chuckle, but that's probably because I'm a cynical person who knows too much about the world.
Well, I was going to say, in the end, there's something like 6 corporations. So, yeah.
It's Unilever, I think, owns them both.
It is, yeah.
And so you've got Dove going, look, women, all shapes, sizes, come together. And then the next advert will be Lynx going, whoa, birds love a bit of Lynx, whoa.
That's why, folks, just remember, corporations are not your friend.
And neither are billionaires.
Also this. One of the things I wanted to touch on before we wind up for the night is Rachel's mention of feng shui and the weird way the apartment was cut up. I do think there is something to the concept of flow. I don't know that necessarily corresponds exactly to the tenets of feng shui, but I do think there is something to that, because I mean, we've all been in places, I'm sure, where it feels like this is just laid out badly. I feel ill at ease just being here. There's something about the awkwardness of the layout.
Yes. It can put you out a bit. I remember we went to a stag do about 10 years ago, and me and my mate were stopping in a room, and this was a hotel, but it clearly had been some kind of old people's home, I think.
Oh, interesting.
And so we'd got a double room, but it was shaped like an L.
Oh.
And so my bed was in the corner of the L, and his was round the other side. So technically neither of us could see each other, despite being in the same room. It was stupid.
Weirdly, my cousin and I stayed in a place like that in the city of Nelson, BC, in one of the famously haunted, or I think the famously haunted hotel there. And we had an L-shaped room. It was very odd. It was, I guess, nice for privacy, but strange.
So it would drag me back. I didn't feel cool. I don't like being in a room and not being able to see someone else who's in the same room. I couldn't settle.
Interesting.
But then I made the mistake of placing my bed underneath a very low-hanging lamp and nutted it at about 5 a.m, much to my friend's amusement.
See, you are psychic, and you knew that was coming.
I did. I knew it would make him laugh. That's why I did it.
You should send an email, try and get on our show.
Excellent. Do you have guests?
I don't know. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you.
But yeah, we're a wonderful well, depends on your perception, I suppose. We're a wonderful collection of experiences, especially as we've got a Voyager.
Yeah, absolutely.
Classic Voyager experience there, Rachel. And Australia's been on my to-do list for several years. So I know too many people down there now. I'm going to have to go eventually.
If I'm ever in Melbourne, I will absolutely take you up on that. All right. Well, again, thank you to everyone who sent in your stories. And if you have a story you would like to share, we would love to hear it. Send it to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. That's ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. And we will share it on a future episode. All right. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Ghost Force shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123 or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories. He's also host of the Luke Lore podcast, available everywhere fine podcasts live. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit account. Tanya Downing, who manages our Facebook community.
Our paranormal conductor on our bus ride into the supernatural is Mr. Brennan Storr.
And of course, my friend, my co-host, is the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
Banshees.
Oh.
And other harbingers of death from around the world. So
I'm into it.
Yes, we will discover some situations of reports of where other people see the banshee coming for someone, and some unfortunates who don't hear the banshee and everybody else does, and therefore everybody thinks, oh dear. And lots of other strange stories like that. So it's quite interesting and remarkable once again that this phenomena has numerous names and versions from around the world.
Very cool. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across most social media networks and all good and bad podcast sites.
Fabulous. I'm Largely the Truth on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And you can find my horror fiction show, Fear Daily, everywhere fine podcasts live, and at feardaily.com. And in fact, this past week we ran a story called Witch Doors, which was based on a short film by Cannell, who you've heard on this show once. He is, of course, host of Sinister Cinema, although I actually don't know if he's doing that anymore, but he started making films in Unreal Engine 5, and the short that inspired Witch Doors just won an award at the Soho Horror Fest. So congratulations to Cannell. Yeah, his Forest Service won they're having a competition for a Blair Witch-inspired short film, and his short Forest Service is what made it. So again, congratulations to Cannell. And if you want to hear the story based on that, Witch Doors, listen to Fear Daily. As we said at the top of the show, we couldn't do this without our patrons. Patrons get bonus shows, additional conversations between Paul and myself, spooky articles, all kinds of cool stuff. And they also get ad-free early release. And who doesn't want that? Ads suck. We also just have a really great community of cool people who they comment on things, they talk amongst themselves. It is a really lovely place. And if you want to join our community of cool people, click the link in the show notes or head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. You can also subscribe to Premium via Apple Podcasts and YouTube. And of course, if you go a little further into the Patreon and into YouTube, there's a very special tier. a tier that gets you shouted out on this show. Every second story episode, once a month, you get to be part, well, you're always a part of the thing, but once a month, you get to be saluted as such. You are a part of a little something we like to call Ghost Force. Your microphone is off.
Ooh.
That's right. Patrons of the $20 level and above get shouted out here on Ghost Force every second story episode because you're crazy, and by God, we love you for it. That's a goblin laugh. Now it's slightly unseemly, but we're just going to keep moving on. Oh, he's getting closer. Don't let him send me to Dubai, too. This gets weirder every time. This time around, the members of Ghost Force are...
Atham Saragon,
Crazy Mom Canada,
City,
Floey Two Hats,
Gabrielle Hollandes,
Hannah Brown,
Hannah Siemens,
Hilary de Saussure,
Jade Moores,
Jenny Bonanani, Jenny Bonanani, Jenny Bonanani,
Jason R. Slaughter,
Slaughter, Jennifer Mullen,
Joseph Kamal,
Kissing Kate Barlow,
Liam Dirk,
Mara Noriega,
Mark Semler,
Megan Rocket,
Merlin Hansen,
Nicola,
Peter Gunn 08.5,
Rebecca Brink,
Robin Tien,
Rocket Ronnie Shenanigans,
Scrapbot 13,
Surreptitious Shipley.
Shannon Steyer.
Shit, I went in the wrong order.
Okay, I got you.
Thank God for Paul. Trent Cannon. We're just gonna move past it. You are the few. You are the spooky. You are Ghost Force. For real, guys, thank you so much. Again, we appreciate all our patrons, but Ghost Force, you are a special kind of crazy, and we love you for it. If you want to have your name read out in that sometimes completely normal and other times completely unhinged segment, sign up at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys and subscribe at the Ghost Force level. Paul, my friend, any guest spots coming up?
I have one that is currently being organised, but I'm not sure of any date, so it's probably not going to be this side of Christmas.
Okay, well, we will keep everyone posted. Again, check the blog at ghoststoryguys.com. You'll find links to all of our guest appearances there. I was recently on an episode of Where Did the Road Go? That just dropped last week or earlier this week, I guess. And that is me, Soraya, and Saxon talking about missing 411 cases. And really, I got to be honest, pointing out some pretty distressing gaps in the research. It's not really great. I'm just very disappointed as someone who really has quite enjoyed the missing enjoyed is the wrong word, but found missing 411 very interesting over the years. I still think there is something there, but it was distressing to see how much in certain cases David has, it seems, tailored the evidence to fit his hypothesis as opposed to basing his conclusions on the evidence at hand. Again, you can listen to that by searching for Where Did the Road Go, or just by, again, clicking the link in the show notes and heading to ghoststoryguys.com. If you want to pick up some Ghost Story Guys merch, head to our website at ghoststoryguys.com. We have all kinds of cool stuff. I'll be uploading a couple new designs here in the next few days. You have episode covers, our logos, our Goat Story Guys tee designed by Catherine Holmes, and so many other cool things. Again, that's at not Goat Story Guys. That's a very different website. I should probably get that. Again, that's ghoststoryguys.com for all your merchandise needs. Get a t-shirt. We can't get them here in Canada. The Postal Service is on strike right now, so you order it for us. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes, or by going to nightharvestrecordings.com. That is, of course, the Ghost Story Guys house label. And I think that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then,
into the darkness we go. Honestly, I don't even know if the audience remembers that bit. I don't care because it makes me smile.
Hey, I can't help it. I mean, the only other long-term they lived in Stoke, which, to be fair, they might as well be in Dubai.
Dubai, that's it. Not good.
For how far away from the future it is. I just needed some guidance. What's my,
My
what
motivation.
am I feeling? Yeah, that's my motivation.
That's showbiz, baby. Honestly, if that had been in the Michael Bay Transformers movies, I would like them a lot more. The Megatron, he's working in Australia now. Okay, Prime. You seem honest. We'll believe you. Sentinel Prime's working for Al Jazeera. He changed his phone number.
I'm so excited. I'm going to play Frere Jacques again.